My wife had been cheating with the neighbor for a year. She had everything she wanted. But on the day of our wedding anniversary, she was surprised, and then I. My name's Nathan, and I'm a 38-year-old investment banker living the high life in San Francisco. Or at least, I thought I was. 7 years ago, I married Elena. She's everything I'd ever wanted. Beautiful, smart, and, for a while, I thought, loyal. We live in a stunning penthouse overlooking the bay, complete with floor-to-ceiling windows and a balcony that feels like it's floating over the water. The place is a testament to our hard work, or so I thought. We just celebrated our 7th anniversary with a weekend getaway to Napa Valley. It was everything you'd expect: private tastings, vineyard tours, candlelit dinners. Elena looked radiant, smiling in every photo, toasting our years together with that glint in her eye. At that moment, I felt like the luckiest man alive. But here's the kicker. A few days after we got back, I stumbled across something that changed everything. It was a simple mistake, really. Elena left her laptop open on the kitchen counter, and I saw an email notification pop up. Normally, I wouldn't pry, but it was from our neighbor, Gregory Fields. He's one of those tech moguls who made it big in Silicon Valley. A guy who probably has a dozen Teslas in his garage and a yacht docked somewhere. Curiosity got the better of me. I clicked. What I read made my stomach twist. They were arranging to meet that night at his place. And from the sound of it, this wasn't the first time. I couldn't breathe. My wife, my Elena, was sneaking around with this guy right under my nose. My mind raced through memories, trying to pinpoint any signs I'd missed. It was like someone had ripped my perfect life to shreds in a single second. Confrontation was my first instinct, but then I realized I needed more. I wanted the whole story. If she was going to betray me like this, I'd at least get the satisfaction of knowing every detail. So I decided to keep my discovery to myself. For the next few days, I pretended everything was normal. I kept up the small talk, the morning coffee routine, the goodnight kisses. But behind the scenes, I was setting up a plan. I work in finance, so I know how to handle money. I bought a high-end surveillance system, $50,000 worth of hidden cameras, discrete audio devices, and the kind of software you'd expect in a spy movie. I needed to know the full extent of her betrayal, and I wasn't going to miss a thing. I installed the cameras myself, one in our living room, another in our bedroom, and a third on the balcony where Elena often took phone calls. I even placed one in the hallway outside Gregory's penthouse. That was trickier, but I managed to slip it onto a decorative plant near his door. Over the next few months, I recorded everything. I caught their secret smiles, the hurried embraces, the whispers. Watching it felt like being stabbed repeatedly. But I kept going. I needed every shred of evidence. The first time I watched them together, I felt my blood boil. There was no remorse in her eyes, no hesitation. She looked at him the way she used to look at me. But the worst part? The guy was brazen. Gregory would stroll into our building as if he owned the place, exchanging pleasantries with me as he went. I had to resist the urge to punch him right there in the elevator. I kept this up for a full year. I became obsessed, reviewing footage late into the night. I compiled everything, organizing it chronologically, and documented each encounter. I cataloged their meetings, noting down dates and times like a detective building a case. At one point, I wondered if I'd gone mad, but I couldn't stop. I needed to be thorough. During this time, I kept up appearances with Elena. I played the loving husband, joined her for dinners, and even accompanied her to social events. I thought I might catch a glimpse of guilt, some tiny hint that she knew I was onto her. But she never slipped. She was as charming and affectionate as ever. If anything, she was more attentive. It was almost like she was trying to convince herself that everything was fine. On some level, I think she sensed my distance, but she didn't question it. Maybe she thought I was too wrapped up in work to notice her double life. Or maybe she just didn't care. I didn't know which was worse. By the end of the year, I had enough evidence to blow this whole thing wide open. I had hours of footage, hundreds of photos, and countless recordings. I could ruin her and him in a heartbeat. But what would that accomplish? I couldn't decide. I was sitting on a ticking time bomb, with no idea what to do next. So here I am, writing this out, wondering what my next move should be. I have everything I need to confront her, to expose her. But as I stare out at the San Francisco skyline from our penthouse balcony, I wonder, what would that actually achieve? Would I feel vindicated or just hollow? I don't know what I'm going to do yet, but one thing's for sure, my life will never be the same. So, after finding out about Elena and Gregory, I started to dig into his life. This guy was rolling in money, just like me, but in a flashier, Silicon Valley kind of way. He lived next door in a modern mansion worth around $12 million. Sleek glass walls, sprawling terraces, a pool with an infinity edge, the whole 9 yards. The kind of place you'd see on the cover of some luxury magazine. I'll admit, a part of me envied the freedom he seemed to have, but most of me just wanted to watch him fall. Elena and Gregory weren't exactly hiding their affair, just hiding it from me. They met in some of the most extravagant places you could imagine. Sometimes they'd stay close to home, booking a suite at a high-end hotel in San Francisco. But other times, they'd jet off across the country. The most frequent destination? The Ritz-Carlton in Los Angeles. I even managed to follow them once. Yes, I followed them. I flew down on a whim, using my connections to get a room nearby. I watched them from a distance as they checked into a suite that costs $4,000 a night. Just think about that, $4,000 for a single night. All for a place where they could play out their fantasy, while I sat there, stewing in rage. I remember seeing her dressed up that night, stepping out in this ridiculously expensive designer dress. I knew she'd used my credit card to buy it. There she was, dripping in luxury, parading herself around like a queen. And there I was, the sucker who paid for it all. Their nights were filled with dinners at exclusive restaurants, private car services, and shopping sprees in boutiques that would make most people's wallets weep. I'd track her spending through our shared account, noting every purchase. I even knew which bottle of wine they ordered, a 2012 Chateau Margaux, $1,500 a bottle. I jotted it all down. I couldn't stop myself. I needed to know every single detail. They didn't limit themselves to LA either. One time, they flew to New York, staying in a penthouse suite overlooking Central Park. Another time, it was Miami, where they booked a private yacht for the day. Elena had always talked about wanting to see Miami together, but I never had the time. Seeing her enjoy it with him instead, it felt like a knife twisting in my gut. But I couldn't look away. Every time I thought about confronting them, my chest tightened. There were moments I almost did it. I'd imagine storming into one of their dinner dates, flipping the table, and making a scene. But then I'd stop. I'd find myself frozen, a mix of rage and heartbreak holding me back. You see, part of me still loved her. Even after all of this, I wasn't ready to let her go. I knew it was irrational, but love and logic rarely see eye to eye, right? The deeper I dove into their world, the more I found myself teetering on the edge. I wanted revenge. Badly. I had every bit of dirt I needed to destroy her reputation, to ruin his life. But I also knew that once I crossed that line, there'd be no going back. And that thought terrified me. I didn't want to be the guy who torches his own life just to watch the ashes fall. But the anger? The anger was relentless. So, I hatched a plan. I'd keep gathering dirt, not just on Elena, but on Gregory too. If he wanted to play in the big leagues, I'd show him what real gamesmanship looked like. I'd track down his business dealings, his investments, his little side projects. It wasn't hard. In my line of work, I have access to resources most people only dream of. I knew which stocks he held, which companies he had interests in, even the offshore accounts he thought were hidden. If I wanted to, I could bring his entire empire crashing down. But here's the thing. I never actually pulled the trigger. It was like holding a loaded gun, but being unable to squeeze the trigger. Why? Because of Elena. Because no matter how much I wanted to hurt her, I couldn't shake the memories of our good times together. The moments that had felt so real, so honest. I kept telling myself there was still something worth saving, that somehow, this nightmare could end without complete destruction. This internal struggle, it became a constant companion. I'd wake up, think about going scorched earth, and then pull back. I'd review my recordings, compile my notes, and then shove it all back into a drawer, telling myself I wasn't ready yet. I could see how this was driving me insane, but I was in too deep to back out now. I couldn't just pretend like nothing had happened. After one of their LA trips, Elena came back with a gift for me. A watch, something sleek and expensive. She handed it to me with that same smile, as if nothing had changed. I felt sick. Did she buy it out of guilt, or was this some twisted way to keep me in the dark? I didn't know, but I accepted it, playing my role in our charade. I even thanked her, putting it on as if I cared. Inside, I was boiling over. I found myself thinking about all the ways I could hurt her, ruin her life like she'd ruined mine. I fantasized about making it public, about showing our friends, our families, the world, who she really was. I could see the headlines, the gossip, the shock in people's eyes. I'd be the poor, wronged husband, and she'd be the heartless adulteress. It would be perfect, but every time I got close, I felt a pang of something. Maybe it was pity, maybe it was regret. I wasn't sure, and so I'd hold back, just a little bit longer. I figured, if I could keep holding on, maybe I'd find the right moment. Or maybe the universe would hand me the perfect opportunity to settle the score once and for all. For now, though, I wait, I watch, and I plan, biding my time until I know for sure what I'm going to do. Because when the moment comes, I want to be ready. I want them both to feel the full weight of what they've done. And when they do, I'll be there to watch it all unfold. One evening, I was in the lobby of our building, pretending to read emails while my mind raced with thoughts of Elena and Gregory. I was tired, frustrated, and on the edge of making a bad decision when I noticed her for the first time. She walked in, head held high, carrying a designer handbag, with an aura of confidence that instantly caught my eye. Sophia Green. I'd seen her around a few times, but we'd never actually spoken. She lived a couple of floors below us in a condo worth around $3.5 million. Not exactly in the same league as Gregory's mansion, but easily one of the nicest places in the building. Sophia's the kind of woman you describe as effortlessly captivating. Late 20s, with a style that screamed old money and class. She didn't flaunt it the way Elena did. Instead, she had a subtle elegance. Her place was filled with priceless artwork, pieces that even I couldn't afford without a serious dent in my bank account. And the car? A Porsche 911, sleek and silver, worth at least $150,000. Sophia was the real deal, and when she glanced my way that night, I felt a spark. We struck up a conversation, casual at first. I asked her about the latest renovations in the building, which was the kind of small talk that made me feel like I had some semblance of a normal life. But then, she caught me off guard by saying, "I've seen you around, Nathan. You always look so preoccupied. Everything all right?" I hesitated, caught between the need to keep my secret and the urge to unload it all. There was something about her that made me want to open up. So, I did. I told her everything, about Elena, Gregory, my year of secret recordings, and the revenge I'd been plotting but couldn't bring myself to carry out. To my surprise, Sophia listened intently, her eyes fixed on me with a mix of sympathy and curiosity. When I finished, there was a long pause. Then she smiled, a little wickedly, and said, "Well, it sounds like you've been suffering alone for too long. Maybe it's time someone helped you out." I asked her what she meant, and that's when things got interesting. Sophia offered to help me in my revenge scheme. She'd had her own share of heartbreak, and from what she shared, it seemed like she knew exactly how it felt to be betrayed. She suggested that we stage a romance, let Elena and Gregory believe that I'd moved on, that I'd found someone else. At first, I thought she was joking, but the more we talked, the more it made sense. If they were so eager to hurt me, maybe it was time they felt a little pain themselves. Sophia and I began spending more time together. We'd meet up at her condo, which was filled with artwork and artifacts that I'd only ever seen in museums. Each piece had a story, and Sophia was more than happy to share. Her family came from old money, and though she didn't flaunt it, there was a certain ease with which she navigated life that only comes from being born into wealth. I admired that about her. She was elegant but approachable, sophisticated yet down to earth. There was a night when we were sitting in her living room, sipping on a ridiculously expensive bottle of red wine that she'd casually pulled from her cellar. I remember watching her as she spoke, her eyes lighting up as she recounted tales from her family's past, stories of luxury and scandal that made my own seem almost tame. But underneath that polish, I could sense a darkness, a shared hurt that made us more alike than I would have thought. After a few glasses of wine, our conversation took a more serious turn. Sophia leaned closer, her eyes locking onto mine, and asked, "Are you sure this is what you want? Revenge can be messy." Her words hung in the air. I knew she was right, but the idea of making Elena and Gregory pay for what they'd done was too tempting to resist. I told her I was sure that I needed to see this through. She smiled, that same wicked smile, and leaned in even closer. "Then let's give them a show they won't forget." The next day, we started putting our plan into action. Sophia was meticulous, planning out every detail, from the public places we'd be seen together to the hints we'd drop that would surely make their way back to Elena. We'd take casual strolls around the building, laughing and leaning into each other, making sure to cross paths with the building's most notorious gossip. It didn't take long for the rumors to start circulating. There was a thrill to it that I hadn't felt in years. Sophia and I became partners in crime, and with every passing day, I felt my anger toward Elena and Gregory start to shift into something else. It was still there, smoldering under the surface, but I had an outlet now. I had Sophia, and the more time we spent together, the more I found myself genuinely enjoying her company. Our relationship became the talk of the building. We'd go out to dinner at high-end spots, the kind of places where everyone knows everyone. We'd order elaborate dishes, clink glasses, and laugh as if we didn't have a care in the world. Sophia played her part perfectly, her hand on my arm, her laughter lingering just a little too long. It was all an act, of course, but there were moments when it felt almost real. The first time Elena saw us together, I thought I might actually lose my nerve. Sophia and I had just returned from one of our staged dates, and as we entered the building, there she was, standing by the elevators with Gregory by her side. The look on her face, surprise, confusion, maybe even jealousy, was everything I'd hoped for. I wrapped my arm around Sophia's waist, pulling her close, and whispered something in her ear that made her laugh. It was all part of the plan, but damn if it didn't feel good. Gregory gave me a polite nod, as if he was trying to maintain some semblance of decency, but I could see the tension in his jaw. Elena just stared, her eyes darting between us, clearly trying to process what she was seeing. I met her gaze, holding it for just a moment before turning away, as if she was nothing more than a stranger. Inside, I was buzzing. The tables had turned, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control. Sophia and I continued our act, and as the weeks passed, our relationship grew more elaborate. We'd take weekend trips to Napa, posting photos on social media that were just vague enough to leave everyone guessing. We'd dress up for black tie events, arriving arm in arm, looking every bit the perfect couple. And slowly, I began to see the cracks in Elena's facade. She'd watch us, her expression hardening, her smiles becoming strained. It was working, but something else was happening, too. The more time I spent with Sophia, the more I felt a genuine connection. There was a depth to her that I hadn't expected, a vulnerability that she hid well, but that I'd started to see glimpses of. I found myself wanting to know more about her, about the life she'd lived, about the pain she carried that mirrored my own. And for the first time, I wondered if our fake relationship could become something real. For now, though, I was focused on the plan. The revenge wasn't complete. Not yet. There was still work to do, still ways to twist the knife a little deeper. But with Sophia by my side, I felt ready for whatever came next. Once Sophia and I decided to escalate our little charade, we committed fully. We weren't just going to play at being a couple. We were going to become the talk of the town. Our goal? To make Elena feel the sting of betrayal, the same way she'd made me feel. But we'd do it in style. The first step was to document everything. I invested a hefty $20,000 in high-end recording equipment, hidden cameras, discreet microphones, the works. I wasn't going to miss a single moment of this. If Elena's downfall was to be complete, I needed irrefutable proof, and I wanted every single angle covered. Once the gear was set up, Sophia and I started planning our next few months with a meticulous precision that bordered on obsessive. Our first big outing was to the Amanjiri Resort in Utah. For those unfamiliar, it's the kind of place where A-listers go to escape from the world. Private, secluded, and absolutely stunning. We booked a suite that ran $5,000 a night, complete with a private terrace overlooking the desert. I remember watching the sunset with Sophia, her silhouette framed against the canyon as we sipped on overpriced champagne. It was surreal, a perfect scene that seemed almost too cinematic to be real. But that's what we wanted. Something that would make Elena question every choice she'd ever made. The first night, Sophia and I staged a full photo shoot. I had the cameras rolling, capturing every touch, every kiss, every smile. We made it look as romantic as possible, like two people lost in each other. It was a strange mix of acting and something else, something that felt dangerously close to real. But I brushed it off. This was all part of the plan, and I had to stay focused. We went shopping the next day, hitting up Rodeo Drive. Sophia's taste was impeccable, and she knew exactly what she wanted. I let her loose with my credit card, watching as she picked out designer dresses, handbags, shoes, the works. She racked up a cool $10,000 in just a few hours. I could have stopped her, but honestly, I enjoyed it. This was all for show, all part of the spectacle that would eventually bring Elena to her knees. Every penny was worth it. After Utah, we jetted off to Aspen, staying at the St. Regis. Another 5-star experience, another $4,000 a night for a suite that screamed luxury. We pretended to be on a whirlwind romance, posting photos of snowy landscapes, cozy fireside drinks, and even a couple's massage that we staged for the cameras. I knew Elena would see these photos eventually. I knew they would eat at her, make her wonder what I was up to, who I was with, and why I seemed so happy. The thing is, though, I didn't have to pretend as much as I thought I would. Sophia was good company. She had this way of making everything seem like an adventure, even when I was still seething with resentment just beneath the surface. We laughed, we talked, we shared stories late into the night. Sometimes, I'd forget that this was all a ruse. But then I'd remember the betrayal, the lies, and it would all come rushing back. We repeated this pattern over the next few months, traveling from one exclusive destination to another. I kept a detailed log of every expense, every hotel, every extravagant meal. I made sure there was a paper trail, something that Elena would find impossible to ignore. It wasn't just about making her jealous. It was about showing her what she'd thrown away. I wanted her to see the life we could have had, the love that could have been hers if she hadn't chosen someone else. Our next stop was Miami. This time, we booked a penthouse suite overlooking the ocean, complete with a private rooftop pool. Sophia suggested we stage a few candid shots, the kind that would look spontaneous but were anything but. We spent the afternoon lounging by the pool, posing as if we were completely in love. I knew the cameras were capturing everything, every angle that would drive the knife in deeper. Sophia and I grew closer during these trips, and I could tell that it wasn't all just pretend for her. There were moments when she'd look at me, and I'd see something in her eyes that made me wonder if this was turning into more than just a revenge scheme. And if I'm being honest, I didn't hate it. I'd been so consumed by anger and hurt that I hadn't realized how much I missed having a genuine connection with someone. But again, I kept reminding myself that this was about Elena, about making her suffer the way I had. One night, back in San Francisco, we decided to stage a dinner date at a high-end restaurant that Elena and I used to frequent. We made a show of arriving in style, pulling up in Sophia's Porsche, dressed to the nines. I made sure we were seated at a table where we'd be visible, just in case anyone we knew happened to be around. And wouldn't you know it? Elena's best friend walked in about halfway through the meal. I almost laughed out loud. The timing was perfect. Sophia played her part flawlessly. She leaned in close, touching my arm, laughing at my jokes, all the while casting casual glances in the direction of Elena's friend. I knew it would get back to her, and I knew she'd hate it. I was counting on it. By the end of the night, I was buzzing with the thrill of it all. It felt like we were winning, like we had the upper hand for once. And then came the final touch, our own private documentary. Using my surveillance gear, we recorded a series of clips, capturing our moments together in every glamorous setting. I edited them into a montage, complete with background music and transitions. It was brutal, carefully crafted to look like a genuine love story. I couldn't wait to see the look on Elena's face when she saw it. The irony is, as I pieced it all together, I started to feel a strange sense of satisfaction. I'd set out to destroy Elena, to make her pay for what she'd done. But along the way, I'd found something else, something that felt almost like closure. It wasn't that the pain was gone. It was still there, simmering beneath the surface. But I had something to focus on, something to distract me from the rawness of it all. Sophia and I continued our affair, our carefully staged love story that was as much an act as it was real. There were moments when I wondered if we could actually make it work, if there was a future beyond the game we were playing. But for now, I was content to let things play out. I wanted to see where this road would lead, and I wanted to be ready for the moment when Elena finally realized what she'd lost. As I wrapped up the final edits on our video, I felt a surge of anticipation. I had all the pieces in place, all the evidence I needed to tear her world apart. And when the time was right, I'd release it all, and watch as everything she'd built came crashing down. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. It was our wedding anniversary, our 8th, to be exact. I had everything planned down to the smallest detail. For this, I spared no expense. I bought a custom USB drive encrusted with crystals, something that looked as extravagant as the occasion demanded. That little piece of hardware cost me $1,000, but it was worth every penny. It was the perfect disguise, a glittering facade for the truth that lay within. I wrapped it up in a velvet box, adding an extra layer of anticipation, like it was some precious piece of jewelry. When I handed it to Elena over dinner, I watched her face closely. She looked surprised, maybe even touched. "What's this?" she asked, with that smile I used to love but now barely recognized. "Oh, just a little something to celebrate us," I replied, keeping my tone light. "I put together a collection of memories from the past year. I thought you might enjoy looking back on all the good times." I could see the curiosity in her eyes as she opened the box and took out the drive. I had carefully edited the footage, stringing together moments from my secret recordings with a hauntingly beautiful soundtrack, Your Song by Elton John, a song that had played at our wedding. I knew the irony would hit hard. I wanted her to feel every single beat of it. We sat on the couch, and I pulled up the video on our TV. She leaned back, glass of wine in hand, expecting a montage of us. I'd started the video with clips from our earlier years, a classic bait and switch. There were moments from our honeymoon in Paris, our first Christmas together, lazy Sundays on the couch, and candlelit dinners. I saw her eyes soften, lost in nostalgia, smiling as if she were truly happy. Then the screen flickered, and the tone shifted. The music changed to something slower, heavier, almost sinister. And that's when I began splicing in the footage of her and Gregory. The clandestine meetings, the whispers, the stolen kisses, all of it, in sharp, vivid detail. I'd even included some of their escapades from their trips, the scenes from the Ritz-Carlton suite, and the yacht in Miami. It was all there, undeniable and brutally raw. At first, she didn't seem to understand. Her smile faltered, and her brows knitted together in confusion. Then her eyes widened as realization dawned. Her face drained of color, and she glanced at me, searching for an explanation, but I kept my expression neutral, just watching her. I wanted her to feel every second of this, to experience the helplessness that had plagued me for months. What is this?" she stammered, her voice shaky. I leaned back, casually swirling my wine. "It's our life, Elena. All of it. Every single moment you thought I didn't know about." The video continued to play, and with each new clip, her expression shifted from shock to horror to something closer to rage. She clenched her fists, her knuckles going white, but she didn't look away. I could see the storm building behind her eyes, a mix of shame and anger that she couldn't quite hide. This is sick," she finally said, her voice trembling. I raised an eyebrow. "Is it? Or is it justice? You thought you could play me, lie to me, and I'd never find out. Did you really think I was that oblivious?" She opened her mouth to say something, then closed it, clearly at a loss for words. I could tell she was scrambling for an excuse, a way to twist this in her favor, but there was nothing she could say that would erase the reality in front of her. The footage ended with a final, lingering shot of Elena and Gregory, standing on his balcony, laughing as if they didn't have a care in the world. I'd overlaid a single line of text at the end, Some things can never be forgiven. The screen went black, and for a long moment, there was silence. I watched her, waiting for her to react. When she finally turned to me, her eyes were blazing. "You had no right," she hissed. I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that echoed in the silence. No right? No right to know the truth about my own life? You betrayed me, Elena. You shattered everything we built together, and you did it without a second thought. Don't talk to me about rights. Her face twisted, caught somewhere between a sneer and a grimace. So what now? Was this just about hurting me? Is that all this was? I leaned in close, lowering my voice. I wanted you to feel the same pain you put me through. I wanted you to see what you've become. And I wanted you to know that I was never as blind as you thought I was. She slammed her wine glass down, spilling crimson liquid across the table. You're a monster. Maybe, I replied, shrugging. But I didn't start this. You did. You could have been honest. You could have walked away. But instead, you chose to lie, to sneak around behind my back. You thought you'd get away with it, but here we are. She sat there, breathing heavily, eyes narrowed as if she could burn a hole through me with sheer force of will. But she didn't argue, didn't deny any of it. What could she say? The evidence was irrefutable. I stood up, feeling an unexpected sense of calm wash over me. I'd thought this moment would be filled with rage, with the kind of fury that could scorch the earth. But instead, I felt free, as if a weight had finally lifted, leaving me clear-headed for the first time in months. I walked to the door, pausing to glance back at her one last time. Happy anniversary, Elena. With that, I left her sitting there, surrounded by the shattered pieces of the life we'd once shared. I didn't need to stay and watch her break down. I'd already seen everything I needed to see. I'd handed her the truth, and now, whatever she did with it was up to her. I headed back to my room and closed the door, leaving her alone to face the ruins of what she'd built. I didn't feel triumphant, exactly, but I did feel satisfied, like I'd finally taken back control. There was a strange sense of closure in it, knowing that I'd seen it through to the end, that I hadn't backed down. What happens next? I don't know. Maybe we'll fight, maybe we'll try to pick up the pieces, or maybe we'll finally call it quits. But whatever comes next, at least I can say I finally stopped letting her lies define my life. And in a way, that's all I ever really wanted. After our anniversary blow-up, I figured things might cool down. I thought maybe Elena would take a step back, regroup, and we'd find a way to end things civilly. Turns out, I couldn't have been more wrong. A week after I gave her the video, Elena hit me with a divorce filing. But she didn't just want out. No, she wanted blood. She filed a lawsuit demanding $5 million in damages, claiming emotional distress and financial compensation for the harm I'd caused her. To say I was shocked would be an understatement. I was furious. I thought she'd finally seen the error of her ways, but instead, she doubled down, going after me with a vengeance. She had some of the most expensive lawyers in San Francisco. Her lead attorney, Sylvia Chambers from Whitman and Burns, was known for her ruthless tactics in high-stakes divorces. Her reputation preceded her. She was a shark in the courtroom, with a portfolio of high-profile cases where she'd won millions for her clients. I wasn't about to let Elena win, though. I reached out to my own legal team, and soon enough, I had Mark Preston from Hayes and Norton on my side. Preston was just as formidable, a master of counterattacks and a brilliant strategist. Each of us poured close to $500,000 into legal fees, hiring private investigators, and digging up dirt. The entire process felt like war. My days became a whirlwind of depositions, meetings, and strategizing sessions with Preston. I knew Elena had skeletons in her closet, and I intended to drag every single one of them into the light. Elena didn't waste any time before turning this into a spectacle. She claimed in court that I'd violated her privacy, that I'd harassed her by creating that video. I could see her playing the victim, twisting the narrative to paint me as a villain. But I was prepared. I had my own ace up my sleeve. Proof of her affair, corroborated by my surveillance footage and receipts from her trips with Gregory. I wasn't going to let her rewrite history. The day the trial started, the tension in the courtroom was electric. Elena sat on one side, dressed to the nines, exuding confidence. Gregory was there too, slouched beside her, a smug grin plastered on his face. I had to restrain myself from walking over and wiping that look off him. Sophia sat beside me, offering silent support. She'd agreed to testify if it came to that, though I hoped it wouldn't. The first twist came when Sylvia, Elena's lawyer, tried to paint Sophia and me as the true perpetrators. She claimed we'd orchestrated the entire situation, that I'd coerced Sophia into a fake affair to set up Elena. Sylvia argued that I was emotionally unstable, that I'd manipulated everyone around me just to justify my actions. She even tried to imply that Sophia and I had been plotting this revenge from the start, going so far as to insinuate that we'd staged the entire relationship for financial gain. But Preston wasn't about to let them run wild with accusations. He countered with a calm, calculated presentation of the facts. He presented the surveillance footage, the receipts from Elena's trips with Gregory, and statements from hotel staff who'd seen them together. He painted a picture of a woman who'd knowingly and repeatedly betrayed her husband, then sought to blame him when her actions were exposed. Then came the testimonies. First up was Gregory. I'd expected him to deny everything, but he surprised me by admitting to the affair, though he claimed it was short-lived and a mistake. He tried to play it down, saying they'd only seen each other a handful of times, that it wasn't serious, but I knew better. I could see the lie in his eyes, and so could the judge. Sophia took the stand next. She spoke with a poise that surprised even me. She detailed our staged relationship, explaining how it had started as a plan for revenge, but had grown into something genuine. She admitted to the part she'd played, but she was careful to emphasize that Elena's actions had set the entire situation in motion. Sophia's testimony painted a picture of a woman who'd been wronged and a man who'd simply sought the truth. Her words were powerful, and I could see the judge taking them in. After a few days of back-and-forth arguments, the real bombshell dropped. Preston had managed to uncover some dirt on Gregory, an affair he'd had with a former employee who'd later sued him for sexual harassment. The details were messy, and the implications even messier. Preston used it to show a pattern of deceit and betrayal, arguing that Elena had knowingly involved herself with a man who had a history of questionable behavior. It was a twist that threw the entire courtroom into chaos. Elena's attorney scrambled to regain control, but the damage was done. The jury had seen enough. By the time closing arguments rolled around, I felt a strange mix of anticipation and exhaustion. I'd spent months preparing for this, gathering evidence, reliving every painful moment of betrayal. Now, it all came down to this final moment. Preston delivered a powerful closing statement, laying out the facts with a cold precision that left no room for doubt. He argued that I'd simply sought the truth, that I'd tried to salvage my dignity in the face of overwhelming betrayal. He emphasized the emotional toll it had taken, the way Elena had flaunted her affair, all while pretending to be the loving wife. Sylvia's closing argument, on the other hand, was a masterclass in manipulation. She appealed to the jury's emotions, painting me as a heartless man who'd invaded his wife's privacy, who'd spied on her to create a story that would justify his actions. She argued that Elena had been trapped in a loveless marriage, that she'd sought comfort in the arms of someone who cared for her. It was a desperate move, and I could see the strain on Elena's face as Sylvia spoke. When the verdict came, it felt like the culmination of a lifetime. The jury sided with me, ruling that Elena had no grounds for damages. The judge dismissed her lawsuit and instead ordered her to pay half of the legal fees, a bitter twist that I hadn't expected but welcomed with open arms. Gregory, meanwhile, was left to face his own legal troubles, his reputation tarnished by the revelations that had come to light. As we walked out of the courtroom, Sophia took my hand, a small smile playing at her lips. I could see the relief in her eyes, the sense of closure that we both desperately needed. We'd fought, we'd struggled, and in the end, we'd come out on top. Elena stormed past us, not even bothering to look my way. Gregory followed, his face pale, his confidence shattered. I knew this wasn't over for them. They'd have to live with the consequences of their actions, with the knowledge that they'd lost everything they tried to steal from me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. Sophia and I stood there, watching as they disappeared into the crowd. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, a sense of finality that I hadn't anticipated. I turned to her, and she smiled, her eyes bright with the promise of something new. "Where to next?" she asked, and for once, I didn't have to think twice. "Anywhere," I replied, taking her hand. "Anywhere but here." The fight was over, and we'd won. But more than that, I'd found something that mattered, a future, a chance to start over. And as we walked away from the courthouse, I knew that whatever lay ahead, I was ready for it. When the dust finally settled, Elena walked away with $2 million. A far cry from the $5 million she demanded, but the court felt that was more than enough. For me, that payout was a small price to pay for my freedom. I gladly wired the funds, ready to put that chapter of my life behind me. With the divorce finalized and the papers signed, I cut ties with everyone involved. I needed to be far, far away from San Francisco, from Gregory, from Elena, from the life that I'd once thought was everything I'd ever wanted. That's how I ended up here, in Monaco. After some soul-searching, I found the perfect escape. A $15 million villa perched high above the Mediterranean, complete with a private beach, an infinity pool that seemed to spill into the ocean, and enough space to lose myself whenever I wanted. The property was a masterpiece of modern architecture: glass walls, expansive terraces, sleek lines, and marble floors. It was both a fortress and a sanctuary, a place where I could finally breathe. Monaco felt like the perfect place to start over, a world away from the chaos, the scandals, and the wreckage I'd left behind. It was the kind of place where I could disappear, where I could blend into a sea of the ultra-wealthy, each one more oblivious to the world than the next. And Sophia? She was there with me, by my side, as she had been from the moment I decided to take back control of my life. We arrived under a brilliant blue sky, the sun shining down on the sparkling sea as if it were welcoming us to our new beginning. We drove through the winding streets of Monaco, passing by yachts that seemed almost comically large, parked in the harbor like floating mansions. It was surreal, but I was ready for this. The villa was every bit as magnificent as I'd imagined. There was something almost otherworldly about it. The way the sunlight flooded through the glass walls, casting reflections on the polished marble floors, the way the breeze carried the scent of the sea right into our living room. We stepped inside, and it felt like a dream. The main room was massive, with high ceilings, luxurious furnishings, and a view that could steal your breath. But the best part? The infinity pool. It stretched across the entire back of the villa, seamlessly blending into the horizon. It was exactly what I needed. A symbol of limitless possibilities, a reminder that the past was behind me and the future was wide open. The first few nights in Monaco felt like a release, a celebration of finally breaking free. Sophia and I spent our days exploring, and our nights in the villa, toasting to our newfound freedom. We sipped on wine, talked about everything and nothing, and let the rest of the world fade away. It was exhilarating. Sophia and I had found a rhythm, a balance. There was no longer any need for deception, for games, or charades. We were simply ourselves, two people who'd been burned by love, now finding solace in each other. She was vibrant here, as if the new surroundings had breathed new life into her. Watching her laugh, seeing her genuinely happy, made me realize just how much I'd missed out on with Elena. This was different, real. We settled into the Monaco lifestyle with surprising ease. We'd wake up each morning to the sun rising over the sea, eat breakfast on the terrace, and then dive into the pool, letting the warm water wash away any lingering thoughts of the past. In the afternoons, we'd explore the city, shopping in the designer boutiques, or we'd take the boat out, skimming across the turquoise waters, the wind whipping through our hair. It was a life I'd always dreamed of, but never quite allowed myself to believe could be real. Occasionally, I'd catch myself wondering what Elena was doing, how she was coping. I imagined her still in San Francisco, nursing her wounds, counting her money, and cursing my name. She'd always been someone who thought she could control everything and everyone, but in the end, she'd lost. She had her $2 million, but that was chump change compared to the freedom I'd gained. I'd escaped her clutches, and that was worth every dollar I'd ever earned. As for Gregory, I didn't give him a second thought. He was a footnote in my story, a minor character who'd played his part and then faded into the background. I'd heard he'd taken a hit in the tech world, his reputation tarnished by the scandal and the lawsuits that followed. But that was his problem now, not mine. I had no desire to check up on him. He belonged to a life I no longer cared about. The real thrill, though, came in knowing that Sophia and I had come out of this stronger than ever. We had a connection that wasn't built on lies or pretense. We'd been through hell together, and we'd come out on the other side, ready to start fresh. We were partners now, not just in revenge, but in life. She was my confidant, my lover, my partner in crime. And here, in Monaco, with nothing but the sea and the sky as our witnesses, I felt like we could finally be ourselves. One night, as we were lying by the pool, Sophia turned to me, her eyes reflecting the starlit sky. "Do you think we can make it work here, Nathan?" she asked, her voice soft and a little uncertain. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I felt something close to peace. "I think we already are," I replied, pulling her close. We sat there in silence, listening to the waves lapping against the shore, the world falling away until it was just the two of us, together. As we began to settle into our new lives, I found myself thinking less and less about the past. I was no longer Nathan Ellis, the wronged husband. I was simply Nathan, a man who'd clawed his way back from the brink, who'd found a way to turn his life around. I was free, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The villa became our sanctuary. We filled it with memories, creating a life that was both luxurious and simple. We hosted dinners on the terrace, invited new friends, and spent lazy Sundays lounging on the beach. There were no secrets here, no hidden agendas, just us and the life we were building together. It felt surreal at times, but it was real, and that was enough. In the end, I realized that this journey hadn't just been about revenge. It had been about finding myself, about breaking free from the chains of a life I'd once thought was perfect. It was about stripping away the illusions, facing the truth, and then rising from the ashes. And as I stood there, looking out over the endless expanse of the Mediterranean, I knew that I'd finally found what I'd been searching for all along. The future was ours, and I was ready to embrace it, whatever it held. I had Sophia by my side, a new life in front of me, and a heart that, for the first time in years, felt whole. So here's to new beginnings, to freedom, and to the beautiful chaos of a life lived on our own terms.